Go live. You're live. Okay. I don't think I need my headphones. I can never remember. Do I need them? Let's just throw them on. Nope, because now I can just hear myself. Don't want them. Don't need them. Okay. Let me see. I'm live on TikTok too. I'm just going to talk to the TikTok people for a second, YouTube folks. TikTok, I'm live. I'm not paying attention to you. If you want to interact with me, you got to go over to YouTube. I'm just turning it on. I'm doing everything on YouTube right now. Sorry. YouTube, hi. How are you? It's been a while. It's good to see you. Okay. Okay, I got my mods going. Good, because, you know, we're going to talk some stuff tonight. I got my drink going because, you know, we're going to talk some stuff tonight. Not a boomer for whoever. Hello. Okay, so welcome. What day is it? It's Monday, May 6th. Friday, May 6th. Monday, Jesus. Monday was the day that will live in infamy. Okay, Keith is here, Arthur's here, Correa's here, Lisa, Captain Dadpool's here too. What's up, everybody? So this is the happy moment of the show while we let people arrive before I start throwing things. I don't know if I'll throw anything. I gotta get my screen organized here. Find my notes that I wanted to chat about tonight. Okay, super chats are open if you want to do that. As always, ask questions in the chat. I will try to get to them, but I'm going to rant a little bit first. If I don't get to your question, just ask it again. If you definitely want me to ask it or read the comment out, super chat is the easiest way to do that. I do have a couple moderators, so if you misbehave, you will be disciplined. My moderators are a former Marine and an Army soon-to-be, maybe already warrant officer. These are not women that you want to mess with, especially this week. They've got my back. Don't fuck around. Anywho, go ahead, ask questions in the chat. I'm not going to pay attention for a little while because got some other things that I want to hit first. You know, I mean, first, let's just take a moment. I've got my Constitution glass here. It is Libations and Conversation. Let's just take a moment, and I wanted to remind everybody about the 9th Amendment, which says that the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others, meaning other rights, retained by the people. In other words, look, we're writing some stuff down here that we're being specific about, but we can't write it all down because there's just too much. And some of these things are also like kind of hard to pinpoint. So, you know, don't be idiots. And Justice Alito decided to be somebody who ignores that. Now, we're going to talk about that. When I set up this YouTube Live, that was not the conversation that I thought we were going to have. When I set this up, I wanted to talk about the new book, American Crusade, how the Supreme Court is weaponizing religious freedom. YouTube folks, I have not come on and chatted with you about it, even though a lot of you are also my folks from other places. I was really excited when I got the book and really wanted to talk about it. We're going to talk about the leaked opinion, but first I'm going to read actually a little bit from the book. Okay, this is the first time ever reading from the book. If you were following on Twitter, some people were tweeting out passages who got advanced reading copies, and there's some folks doing something similar on TikTok. I want to read this out because this sets up the case that we are talking about. This is the case that Alito was writing the opinion on. So I'm just reading a little short passage here because, well, we'll talk about that in a second. 16 days before Ruth Bader Ginsburg died, the Supreme Court scheduled a conference on a case that could end the reproductive freedom of 170 million Americans. Ginsburg died on September 19th, 2020. And the conference, set for September 29th, that would decide whether the High Court would hear this pivotal case was postponed. And then postponed again. It's easy to imagine that the justices were waiting to see what would happen with the election and any possible new justice before taking the case. After delaying and rescheduling more than 20 times, the Supreme Court accepted a case out of Mississippi orchestrated specifically to challenge Roe versus Wade. In fact, Mississippi reworded the question to directly challenge Roe versus Wade after Amy Coney Barrett was put on the court. The challenge will almost certainly succeed now that Amy Coney Barrett has replaced Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And then I get back into a little bit more. Now, you're like, Andrew, you did not talk much about the facts of that case. That seemed to be pretty heavy on the politics. Yeah, that's right. Because the facts of the case don't matter. The law doesn't matter. They have the votes, the conservative bloc on the court. They have the votes, they have the power, and God damn it, they are going to use it. That is where we are. So before we dive into that, I do want to chat about the original plan for tonight for a moment. Tomorrow on my Patreon page, the link is down yonder somewhere. I'm going to publish another excerpt from American Crusade. But this is actually a special excerpt because it's one that is from the editing room floor. So my patrons get, monthly face-to-face video calls where you can actually, instead of just chatting with me, interact, direct messaging, and other big perks depending on the level, including signed first editions of American Crusade. They've been following along with me for a long time, some of them, and I so appreciate the support. But the people who've been with me the longest know that I cut about 100,000 words from this book. There's so much to say, and I cut a lot of good stuff to make it more readable. And that's not because I'm long-winded. Again, it's because this court is so bad and has done so much damage. So anyway, tomorrow for my patrons, I'm going to be posting an excerpt that didn't make the final cut. And it's one that I really, really like. So I wanted to do something with it. I thought about publishing it. I thought about maybe doing a historical review article or a law review article expanding it, but I decided to just give it to my patrons. So if you want to join, all those old posts are available to you. You can go back and see what my writing process has been for the last year. It's kind of fun stuff. So what to do? What do you do? What can you do right now? That is the question that I've been asked by, I think, about everybody I know at this point. The first thing I will say is put your money where your rage is. The Chicago abortion fund organizer said that the other day, and that really resonated with me. Put your money where your rage is. The number one thing that we need to be doing right now is fighting Christian nationalism and working to keep state and church separate. I'm going to get into why that fight is the overarching fight that also affects Roe. I don't mean to minimize what is happening with Roe. I mean that this is a big part of a larger fight. Now, that's of course also the background that I come from, and it's the reason that I chose to fight for the separation of state and churches, because of all the broader implications it has for things like LGBTQ rights and women's rights and reproductive rights and the environment and public education and healthcare. Think about what happened during the pandemic, right? So a win in the separation of church and state, a robust wall of separation between state and church, is a win there and there and there and there, and all of the progressive issues that you care about. So people should really be supporting groups like Americans United for Separation of Church and State. That's the group that I work for now. We have an amazing legal team. We have an amazing policy team. Really would encourage everybody to go do that. If you are a youth who's interested in how can I learn to organize and get grassroots going, we have a great youth fellowship program, and it just opened up a new applications for a new batch of that. I'd love to see some people apply for that. So that's one thing. And the second big thing that you can do right now, and this is just crazily important with what is about to happen, is support abortion funds. And these are the people that are on the ground doing the good work, ensuring that pregnant people can get the health care they need in the face of religious extremists forcing their beliefs on us all. Okay? And the third thing is get political. I posted the other day, voting is not enough when the system is stacked against you. Voting is not enough when the system is stacked against you. It is literally the least you can do. Think about what else you can do above and beyond. Now, in terms of how to get started on any of that, I would go to votesaveamerica.com/row. They've got their fuck bans thing going right. I can't remember the name of the. It's down in the. I put it down in the info on the video. The whole point is to figure out a way to fight back, and I chose that one rather than some of the other lists that just are about abortion funds, because they get you to the abortion funds, but they also talk about how to get political on this too, because that to me is a big piece of this. So, okay, I have a super chat from John Michael Bell. You had to deal with FedSoc people, right? How do these people who are legislating from the bench, are against legislating from the bench, try to explain how nakedly political SCOTUS is? It's only legislating from the bench if the judge is liberal. If the judge is conservative, it is originalism. Okay? I know it's very obvious in that, yes, they are wild hypocrites, crazy hypocrites. They don't square it. They bald face say these things over and over and over again. They don't feel the need to square it. When they do it, it's originalism. When anybody else does it, it's judicial activism. And originalism is just judicial activism with a veneer, a holier than thou veneer to it. There's actually, I wrote a piece a while back. Cannot remember the title, but it's about Judge Kavanaugh, then Judge Kavanaugh, and his textualism and originalism, and how it is so painfully, transparently not a consistent, I will say, judicial philosophy regarding the presidential oath, which is actually spelled out word for word in the Constitution. So it's a very great test of originalism and textualism. Oh, Correa, I'm gonna ask. Correa asked the question about Alito versus Amy Coney Barrett writing the opinion. I'm gonna get to that in a second, but before I get into that, I'm gonna say a couple specifics. It's a really good question. Say a couple specifics about the opinion itself, because the first thing that is crucial to note is that this is a draft opinion. Okay, it is a draft. It is not the law of the land. If you have an appointment at a clinic, keep it. If you need an appointment at a clinic, get one now. Do telemedicine and get mifepristone if you need to. Stock up on it if you're worried. You should be worried. Stock up on your birth control pills too. Get it all now. Just a draft, not the law of the land. Okay? Keep your appointments. And I also want to add that this is not my area of expertise. There are really, truly brilliant lawyers out there who have been fighting for reproductive rights for much longer than I have and know a lot more than me. But also, everybody needs to be screaming about this right now. And that rage should never die because a lot of women are going to as a result of this opinion. The second thing is that, yes, this is a draft. It is a real draft. And it may not be what the final opinion looks like. But the important point is that that opinion is the version of America that Justice Alito and 4 other justices want. That is what they are gunning for. So even if this gets whittled down or diluted, and maybe in the backlash to the leak, maybe John Roberts is able to move some pieces around and change the way things look, or dilute the opinion, this is still the future that they want. This is what they are gunning for, and they have lifetime appointments and the power to make it happen. That is the future they want, and it is a goddamn bleak future. The draft opinion is extreme, it is aggressive, it is abrasive, it is absolutist and utterly uncompromising, while also being very, very broad. It is full of gaslighting and Alito's personal religion, which is also a bit of gaslighting because it's cloaked and implicit in the opinion, which is otherwise pretty in your face. But the first and last paragraphs really include his religion, as is his overall attempt to claim that abortion is just different. Marissa asked, is it possible for a state law to override a potential federal ban? The short answer to that is no. We're going to get into some of those questions for sure. Federal law would preempt states. And this is going to be the next fight. And this is the reason that getting political is so important. So I'll talk about that right now. Actually, no, I want to touch more on Alito's religion and the religion in this opinion, because this opinion does violate the separation of church and state. It is using judicial power to impose one religion on all of us, to impose a religious belief on all of us. And there's a lot wrong with our Constitution. But the separation of church and state is one of the things that the founders got right. The first Constitution to get that right. Separation of church and state is a bedrock that protects and enshrines equality in a way that most Americans fail to understand, but which will be painfully obvious when it's gone. That separation is what ensures that we all have freedom without favor and equality without exception. That separation is America. And when the justices finally tear down that constitutional wall that ensures the separation, they're going to be tearing down America and erecting on its ashes a Christian nation. If that sounds familiar, I just wrote that in a piece for Religion Dispatches. The link is below. My moderators might drop it in the chat for me if you're having trouble finding it. That separation prevents religious extremists from realizing their Christian nationalist dream, right? It's been a major roadblock for opponents of reproductive rights. It forces them to talk about abortion in unfamiliar and secular terms. And you can see this in Alito's opinion. His opinion begins and ends with religion, but a lot of people are going to disagree with that because he phrases it as morality. But that's my point, right? He's forced to adopt these euphemisms for imposing his conservative Christianity on us all. And there was this really great moment in the oral argument of this case. Again, Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health. It's on the OYEZ website. You can actually go listen. And Justice Sotomayor just cuts through all the pretense that has been built up around this issue. And she asks the state of Mississippi, how is your interest anything but a religious view? How is your interest anything but a religious view? And the interest there is the interest that the state has over a woman's body in preventing abortion. And the state had no answer. It fumbled for an answer. And if you want a clearer connection, just look at Marjorie Taylor Greene last week, who was talking about Satan's whispers leading to abortions. The attacks on church-state separation are putting the lives and freedom of countless women at risk. They're threatening LGBTQ people, religious minorities, the religious freedom of everyone who's not a conservative white Christian man. If you want to fight back, join up. Okay, so I'm going to scroll back up for a sec. Will, I see you. I'm going to get to you in a second. So let's talk about the state issue. And like, there's going to be blue states and red states, and we'll be able to get people to blue states where they can get this kind of care. The end of Roe is just the beginning. Okay? The end of Roe is just the beginning. They're not going to stop with overturning Roe. They're coming for a full nationwide ban. They're coming for fetal personhood. They're coming for contraception. If you don't believe that, go read the Hobby Lobby case, in which Justice Alito wrote an opinion saying that, oh, well, they believe that contraception causes abortions, so we're going to accept that belief. And yes, not right on point. Yes, that has to do with a private corporation, but the leap from there to here is not far, and it's obvious, and they may not use that same kind of reasoning, but of course they're coming for this. So what about the blue states, red states thing? They're not going to be satisfied with having Connecticut, for instance, which has passed, or I don't know if they've actually passed it yet, but it's trying to codify basically to become an abortion refuge, to prevent any of its providers from being sued or attacked by other states. And you're contrast that with, for instance, Missouri, which is trying to criminalize even leaving the state to get an abortion. So you've got all the red states trying to make it impossible, blue states trying to make it easy and trying to help people from the red states. That is a recipe for cases getting to this same Supreme Court. Okay? Those fights are going to go up to this Supreme Court, which is going to decide those questions. And I don't think you need a roadmap to figure out which way those cases are going to go. It's going to raise really, really fascinating and awful and scary questions about the right to travel, free speech, for instance. The Supreme Court said that giving money to causes is free speech. So if you want to give to an abortion provider, can the state punish you for that free speech? These kinds of issues are going to work their way up to the Supreme Court that's going to decide them. Plus, all of that is assuming that the federal government isn't taken over and that this area of law isn't entirely preempted, which is very possible. What the Democrats are currently trying to do and unable to do because of the math problem that they have with the Women's Health Protection Act could be the opposite of that can and will be done. Can and will be done. Okay. So, Correa, 2 questions from Correa now. So, was I surprised that Alito wrote this opinion and that it wasn't Amy Coney Barrett? I was a little surprised. I know Amy Coney Barrett was put on that court to write that opinion. So here's what happens when the Supreme Court is deciding cases. The conference that I was reading from, the American Crusade, about, they have oral argument in the case, they go into conference, and then the justices have like a straw poll. They basically vote. How is that? What are you thinking right now? What's your vote going to be? And in this case, it was either a 5-4 or 6-3 decision and vote. And so once that splits up, the senior most judge on each side assigns the opinion. The Chief Justice or the senior most judge on each side assigns who's going to write that opinion for that side. So what you probably had happen here was Roberts and the liberals, it sounds like, though Roberts is not off the hook here. I mean, what it sounds like based on the news stories is that he still wants to overturn Roe, just not as explicitly, which is perfect for his MO. And again, pre-order this book if you want to understand what he's all about. He is not our friend, especially when the challenge coming to gay marriage and marriage equality is going to work its way up the courts. Happy to talk more about that if you ask me. So Roberts over here with the liberals. That means Clarence Thomas assigns the opinion on this side. Now, he should have given it to Amy Coney Barrett. So the question is, why didn't he? There's probably 2 realistic possibilities. One, he did and she passed, said, I don't want to write it. I do not think that happened. I think Alito begged and pleaded and did whatever he could to be the one to write this opinion. It comes through in his opinion. I think he has been right. I don't think this is not his first draft. I think he's been writing this for years, maybe only in his head. But this, and the excitement and the vitriol and just the venom and the spite just really came through. So he really wanted to write this. So I was surprised. The more I read it, the less surprised I was, I guess. Well, I mean, obviously that's a truism. So point being, he really does seem to have desperately wanted to write this. So I think that answers that question, Correa. And do I believe that the interracial marriage protection for forced operations, do I think those are realities? Yes, I think that opinion is a hit list for other rights that they are coming for. I think he put them in there intentionally. I do think contraception is on that list. I do think marriage equality is on that list. I think it's high on that list. I think the people who are telling you are crazy if you think that are the same people who were saying that there was no chance Roe was going to get overturned. I do not trust those Cassandras who got this wrong. This was so easy to predict. I've been screaming about it for at least 3 years now. I've been screaming about marriage equality, and they're going to come for that next since Amy Coney Barrett, because that's the numbers very clearly flipped then. I mean, John Roberts is like a likely vote against marriage equality, overturning Obergefell. Okay. Yes, Jess wants us to remember the states that flip blue and red. Yes, all the blue states will not just be, it's not just federal, but blue states are going to be targeted. by all of the pro-life pro-life anti-abortion forces to get abortion banned there, to flip those states from blue to red. They'll be able to take a lot of that money out of Texas and all of the deep red places and put them into the purple and blue places. So, are there specific ways, Sean asked, that we can pack the courts? Yes, Sean, there are specific ways that we can pack the courts. Listen, I get it. Also, again, if you haven't pre-ordered, I lay out in the last chapter the solutions here, but I will give you, I'll give you a teaser. There's one solution, and it's to expand the Supreme Court. That's it. That's all there is. Forget about impeachments. That's not going to happen. Forget about the figuring out lifetime appointments, and we'll do term limits and make them take senior status and stuff. The people who get to decide whether or not that is constitutional are the same judges whose power you're going to be diluting. And when you read opinions like this, do you have any trust or faith, that this court would do the right thing and say, yeah, we can have a creative way to do term limits, when the Constitution itself says that they get to serve during good behavior? It's right there in the word serve. That's what they're going to say. Senior status isn't serving. So if you want to fix the court, it means expanding the court. And don't talk about packing the courts. The courts have already been packed. They already did it. They stole the seats. The Republicans packed the courts already. That has happened. If you are against court packing, now it's time to figure out, how do we fix that? That already happened. Let's get to a solution. And the solution is to expand the court. And oh no, but if we expand the court, then when the Republicans get power, they might expand it too. So what? Let them do that. If we make 17 judges and they take it to 21, fine. That is less power every single one of those justices wields. I'm all for that. Make it 101 for all I care. What does it matter? That means it's less easy to predict the way these cases are going to go, and you don't have Mississippi rewriting the question in this case because it knows with Amy Coney Barrett on the court that now it's going to be the one to overturn Roe. Yeah, put 101 on there. I don't care. If it's hard for them to work, fine. Do a better job of not being an arm of the Republican Party, of not being a political body, and then we can talk. Okay. Can we clap for the efforts of the Satanic Temple on pro-choice and the Boston flag? Yes. I of course, love the Satanic Temple. They do fun, fantastic work. The obvious failure, and this is what they are trying to point out, which I also get into again in the book, is that the crusade that we are witnessing right now is to privilege and reclaim the privilege of conservative white Christian men. So it's not about religious freedom. It's not about free speech in the Boston case. It's about, it only applies if you're a white Christian man, conservative white Christian man. Then you get religious freedom. So love TST, big fan, but yes. Could the Senate vote next week to codify Roe versus Wade? Could undo? Yes. I mean, yes. The Senate could do that in theory, except it's a math problem. But we always talk about how there are 50 Democrats. That's not true. And King is not a Democrat. He's an independent. He caucuses with the Democrats. Like, if you want things like this to happen, the solution is to put way more Democrats in office. We've given them, this last election was like, we gave them the majority. Why can't they do it? And we didn't. The majority doesn't matter in the Senate. You need 60 votes to do anything. Okay? So don't blame the Democrats for not being able to get done. We gave them a wet fish and told them to cut down a tree. And why can't you cut down the tree? We gave you a wet fish. What's the problem? You are going to have one of two kinds of people in the Senate, a Republican or a Democrat. Okay? If you're not voting for the Democrat, you're helping the Republican win. I mean, that is the math problem. Does it suck? Do I wish that we had ranked voting and all kinds of other things? And should the Senate be abolished? Yes. But that's where we are. That is what we have. And if you want To do this, be realistic about it. Take that anger and be realistic about it. This is what I'm talking about when I'm saying getting political. This opinion is going to happen. Roe versus Wade is gone. I mean, I did a video just like this, 6 months ago when SB8, I said the same thing. Roe versus Wade is gone. This is shocking to see it in print, but this is not a surprise by any stretch of the imagination. The question is, how are we going to fix it a year or 2 or 3 or 4 from now? And how many pregnant people are going to die as a result of what Alito and the rest of the conservative bloc on the court is going to do? So getting political is the solution to this. So somebody said about life, of course this is not about life. Of course this is not about the sanctity of life. If this were about life, we would be talking about universal health care instead of banning one particularly crucial form of healthcare. If this were about life, we'd be banning guns, not banning bodily autonomy. If this were about life, we'd be ending the death penalty. The same people who are aggressively anti-mask and anti-public health during this pandemic, which we are still in, are leading the charge against Roe and in many of the same churches. And I mean, I'm not even getting into things like parental leave and affordable daycare and the countless of other things that we would do for children if it were about that. This is about imposing control and imposing religion on others. But really, it's about conservative white Christian men reclaiming that power and privilege that they are losing to demographics and the steady march of equality. It's about creating 2 separate classes, conservative white Christian men and everybody else. Okay. I'll pause for a minute because I'm feeling it. Take a little sip. Bladensburg felt like the canary I see. There were others. This is not. Please pre-order this book. The link is in the description. Yes, of course there were others. This was so predictable. So I want to talk a little bit about the history and the opinion itself. There's so much that's wrong with this. I read the 9th Amendment at the top because textualists and originalists like Alito claim to be, oh, you can't find that right to an abortion in the Constitution, so it's not there. It's right there in the 9th Amendment, which specifically says, don't do what you're doing, dude. But I really want to talk about Alito's history, too, because y'all know that I'm a history nerd. I love it. I especially love the way that history interplays with the law. That's a big part of why I wrote The Founding Myth, Why Christian Nationalism is Un-American, my first book. And Alito's history has always been bad. In fact, the conservative bloc on the Supreme Court's history has always been quite bad. And it's especially terrible within the state church arena. And what Alito says in the opinion is that the court's governing test is about whether abortion is deeply rooted in the history and tradition of America. Okay, first, this is a terrible test. Okay, it's retrogressive politics masquerading as judicial inquiry. Think of where we would be if history and tradition were the guide. Think about segregation, and what would our country look like if history and tradition were the guide on whether or not segregation is constitutional? If history and tradition were the guide, segregation would be the law. But Alito tries to claim that that ground, right? He says no. He likens Roe versus Wade to Plessy versus Ferguson, which said that separate is equal upheld segregation. Which means, in his mind, his opinion is Brown versus Board of Education. And it is not. His opinion drags us back on purpose with reverence and glee. Now, think about where else we would be if history and tradition were the guide. Expand it out beyond segregation. Think about LGBTQ rights and interracial marriage and contraceptions and women's rights and bodily autonomy. And basically that whole hit list that Alito lays out in the opinion. They are coming for those rights. Now, that's just one problem with history and tradition. It's a garbage test. Garbage. The second problem with history and tradition is that Alito gets it all wrong. Now, again, this is not the first time he's done that. I wrote an article back a while ago about how bad his history is for the Bladensburg Cross case. In the Cross case, and I think I touched on it in American Crusade, and I'm pretty sure it didn't get left on the cutting room floor. And when it comes to state church issues, again, the Supreme Court is just terrible about our history. And there's actually something called law office history. Law office history. This is history that cherry picks historical facts to argue a point. It is not unbiased history as told by historians. It's history with an agenda. And it is a big problem when history and tradition is the guide for justices and judges. And I'm going to give you a different example here to kind of take it into a different context for a minute before we come back to the opinion. School board prayer. Okay, I wrote a law review article a while ago about school board prayer and the history of school board prayer. So I litigated a school board prayer case. I was one of the attorneys on it, along with Rebecca Marker and David Kalianitis. We won a big case in the Ninth Circuit on school board prayer. And the other side claimed this same test. Hey, you should use the history and tradition test. And by the way, there's a long history of prayers at school board meetings. This is what they argued. And so that it's okay now. And outside Christian groups filed briefs arguing the same thing. And these are called amicus briefs. It's not a hill I want to die on. Amicus means friend, as in friend of the court briefs. So they pointed to a few other judges who mentioned this history too, this history of school board prayer. In all, 11 federal judges would have used this non-existent history to let school boards force prayer on students, parents, and everybody else who goes to a school board meeting. And the history was like something out of a game of telephone, what the kids play, where you sit in a circle and one person whispers and around and around and around. That's exactly the history here, okay? And they were going to decide a constitutional question based on that history, okay? So the Ninth Circuit relied on the Fifth Circuit, which in turn cited to a law review article for the proposition that there's a long history of school board prayer. That article had one paragraph on this claimed history, and it was written by a law student with no historical expertise whatsoever. That student, in turn, took her analysis from an amicus brief. And at no point in this chain did a serious scholar or historian vet the history or the historical claim. But nevertheless, it appears in several judicial opinions, including a controlling opinion by a 3-judge panel of the Fifth Circuit. My friend Monica Miller litigated that case. And it gets much worse if you actually look at the original amicus brief, which I did. It was written by, you'll be shocked to know, a Christian nationalist group and a group that is designated an anti-LGBTQ hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center. So this is the Family Research Council, okay? They submitted a partisan amicus brief in a case it was 2005. The brief is less than 8 pages of substance, really poorly researched by a lawyer who was homeschooled and then attended 2 highly religious Christian schools, Dallas Baptist University, and then the law school that was founded by the televangelist Pat Robertson, Regent University Law School. Again, no trained historian or scholar appears to have touched the historical material relied on by 11, now I can do it, 11 federal judges. And that's just a step below the Supreme Court. And they were doing it to decide a constitutional question. Okay? The lack of training and bias came through in the factual and historical research in the brief. So the Family Research Council claimed that 8 states had some history of opening prayers at school board meetings when none of them did. None. And so I traced that history in this law review article, and there's a link on my website. You can find it. I'll put it out later. And basically what it looks like is the hate group's methodology consisted of searching old digitized books and manuscripts and reports for keywords like prayer and invocation and education. It's basically what their work amounted to. And again, 11 federal judges at the circuit court level, one level below the Supreme Court, stated in opinions that the constitutional principle of state-church separation was subservient to American history as retold by a single paragraph in a law student's article, which itself repackaged that brief authored by a hate group with a Christian national agenda that lied about the history. This is a really effective way to alter history and the law when the law is decided by history and tradition. Elevating history over principle is a convenient way to reverse engineer decisions in a way that rob us all of our rights. That's what's happening. Okay, I see your question, Don. I'm going to get to it in a second. I have to finish this rant. The point I'm trying to make is that they often get history wrong. They're often told the wrong history and they just latch on to what they want. And Alito does this in his draft opinion. Okay, remember, he argues that abortion is not deeply rooted in our history and tradition. But he's wrong. Every single state, our history, our common law, all of it allowed abortion before quickening. So quickening is the first noticeable movement of the fetus, typically like 15, 16 weeks usually. So, and this is even around the time the 14th Amendment was ratified. This was the case, which Alito gets wrong in his opinion. There's I believe he's at UC Davis, a law professor named Aaron Tang, who wrote a great, really just interesting law review article recently called "The Originalist Case for Abortion," something like that. And he explains that 21 of 37 states recognized, even after the 14th Amendment, or at the ratification of the 14th Amendment, that pre-quickening abortion was a right, and then again, that was universally embraced at the founding. So throughout our history, pregnant people in most states enjoyed a right to an abortion during the first 15 or so weeks. Basically what we have right now with Roe. So the only way Alito's history is right is if you inject his religious belief into it, and then it's still just wrong. So, okay. End of that rant. John asked, do you think Alito, he doesn't know his history, that's my point. And then he's basing constitutional rights on that flawed history. It's ridiculous. Do you think Alito overplayed his hand? A Roberts-style weakening of Roe seems harder to fight and easier to uphold. This is a good question. I am a little surprised at how vicious this opinion is and how broad it is. A big part of me thought that these justices are so political that what they would do was gut Roe, but leave it standing, so that their elected brethren, mostly brethren, had something to run against still. I think it says that Alito is a true believer when it comes to this stuff, and I think that the fervency of his belief really comes through in the opinion. I also think I don't like to talk about the leak itself because that is so beside the point, but I do think if the leak was intentional, I'm not convinced it was. If the leak was intentional, I think that there's a good chance it was done by somebody on the conservative side to keep the 5 conservative justices that have signed on to the opinion, Alito, Thomas, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Barrett, in line. That is the thing that makes the most sense to me if it was deliberate. Right? Releasing that opinion now, if any one of them peels off, they're going to be just ridiculed and made miserable in the media and pilloried. I mean, really. So there's a chance to me that Alito did overplay his hand, that one or more of those justices was wavering and considering joining John Roberts' more watered down but still terrible, absolutely terrible decision. And this was dropped as a way to kind of keep people in line, to basically seal their fate in a way, really. Now, there's also there's Andrew Torres over at Opening Arguments suggested to me that there's a good possibility that what happened was Ginny Thomas sort of celebrating, look, this is the opinion we're going to get, sending it around to friends, and then one of them leaked it. When you're when you're thinking about whether somebody did something devious or stupid, it's usually more on the stupid side. That's the better explanation almost always. What cuts against that is that we've never had a leak like this in Supreme Court history. So, okay. I know I missed another one. So Captain Dadpool asked, how is your mental health doing? Are you taking care of yourself through all of this? I appreciate that very much, my friend. I'm trying. Monday was really rough. I was up, slept 2 hours that night. I was up all night writing and reading and picking apart and researching. Then the next day, I think I tweeted it out. I had like a banana, and then all of a sudden it was like 6 p.m. But yeah, I got to run in on Wednesday. I got to run in on Friday. I'm feeling a little bit better. I want everybody to stay angry about this. I really, really do. And I don't want you to, the one thing I want to do is calibrate your expectations. This is going to happen. And to fix it, we need to start talking longer term solutions. Okay. I mean, what are you doing for the midterm elections to ensure that no Republicans win? They're the ones who did this. They're the ones who packed this court. We could expand the Supreme Court. We didn't give the Democrats anywhere near enough leverage or votes or power to do that. Let's get a supermajority in there, and then if the Democrats don't do anything, I will join the chorus and say, "Yep." But what we need to do is expand the Supreme Court, and then we need to massive structural change immediately. That codifies and extends voting rights and the franchise to everyone, and in really important and critical ways, like basically what HR 1 was proposing back at the beginning of the Biden administration, before the People Act. Get that done, but you have to expand the court first, and then we can do the codification of Roe, and we can do it in a federal law. We could also talk about doing a constitutional amendment, though those are very dicey. Redo Roe and situate it in equality in the 14th Amendment. Anyway, yes. I feel like we're going back to the dark ages, says Evan. Glad you're fighting on our side. Thank you so much. Cheers, cheers. Cheers, everybody. Appreciate that. I really do. Yeah, they played the long game for 40 years. They chose this issue, and they've had success with it as a result. Okay. Wow, I've been ranting for 45 minutes. Yeah, I mean, there's no silver bullet here. I guess it's really, there's no thing that's gonna make this stick right away. So get this fixed right away. So yes, get angry. Donate to the abortion funds. Join up with groups like Americans United for Separation of Church and State. Do I think the filibuster, Correa asks, is going to be eliminated? I think the Republicans, the second they win a majority, are going to eliminate the filibuster. The minute Mitch McConnell gets back into power, of course, the filibuster's gone. I mean, unless they don't need it, unless they win that big. I think it's crazy that the filibuster is still a thing. Again, it's a math problem right now. We know that there are not the votes to get rid of the filibuster. Joe Manchin, we need, but you have 66 Democrats in there. It either doesn't matter. I mean, even 59, you could get rid of it. So remember the Ninth Amendment. The enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. I also want you to remember, too, in the oral argument for this case, the Dobbs case, Justice Sotomayor asked another question. I already explained to you how she asked, how is your interest anything other than a religious view? No answer to that, because that's all this is. This is imposing religion on everyone. Law professor Caroline Malak Corbin wrote a great piece for NBC News, an op-ed for The Think, kind of listing like 7 brief 7 big problems with this opinion, and then briefly describe them. And one of hers was it violates the separation of church and state. Anyway, Justice Sotomayor asked another question during oral argument. She said, how will this court ever survive the stench? How will this court ever survive the stench? How will we be able to survive? And it shouldn't. It really shouldn't. Not in its current makeup, not in its current form. This is a betrayal, a huge betrayal. It should not survive. If you want to learn more about that, I would encourage you to go pre-order American Crusade, How the Supreme Court is Weaponizing Religious Freedom. And if you want exclusive content, like that drop section from that book that I was talking about, direct messaging, all that fun stuff, go join my Patreon. The links for both are below. Please do that. And stay the fuck angry. Seriously, ride that rage. I'm tamping it down a little bit in this. But you don't need to. You shouldn't. Let's start talking about abortion more openly, too. Talk to your family about it. Say the word abortion. Normalize it. Abortion is healthcare. Abortion is normal. There's nothing wrong with it. And stay mad. Really. Ride that rage. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and end it there. Cheers, my friends. Any last questions, you can shout them out. Otherwise, I'm going to duck off. I'm going to go probably have another one of these. I appreciate so much all of you tuning in and hanging out with me. I can't believe this many of you come to listen to what I have to say, but I so very much appreciate it. Thank you. Stay safe, but also seriously, I mean it, stay angry. That is the most important thing. And then think about how we're going to fix this 1, 2, 3, 4 years from now. Talk soon.